70 à tout.
Well, should we dive into the movie review, or is there anything
Yep.
else you want to do before that?
No, I mean there was some other stuff, but at this, it's so early that it would just be more of a reaction and not so much of a like kind of like
An
kind of like,
analysis.
yeah, an analysis. But it's just
All right.
yeah. Anyway, it's more the same. But anyways, yes. This week's movie is what is it? Oh yeah, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
So before we start, because we were doing movies from 1939.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I wanted, and I kind of wanted to explain like why I wanted to do this particular year, is
Mm-hmm.
because this was such this was a heavyweight year for film. You had, I think it was like 7 movies that were up for Best Picture
Mm-hmm.
that year, and all the movies that we're going to be talking about were multiple nominations. I think all the ones that we talked about won awards in some way or another,
Mm-hmm.
or or at the very least were nominated for sure. But like it was not only was it a change in cinematography, music, but all these movies, like the stories were just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if maybe Andy, you could pull it up. Is like what awards was this nominated for? And what did it win?
Okay, let's see.
Because I when I was watching, it's like I fucking love this movie. This is a great movie.
Yeah, it was awarded quite a bit, or it was nominated for quite a bit.
I think it had like 11 nominations.
Yeah, let me just read them off to you. Outstanding Production nominated, Best Director nominated, Best Actor nominated, Best Writing Screenplay nominated, Best Writing Original Story won, Best Supporting Actor nominated, Best Art Direction nominated, Best Film Editing nominated, Best Music Scoring nominated, Best Sound Recording nominated.
Wow. So
Yeah,
it
that's
won
a
for
lot of awards
best,
just to be nominated for.
right? And well, what it was going up against too is like, pretty amazing as well.
Right? Yeah, because yeah, I, mean, I don't want to give away too much. Well, because one, I don't even know because you're in charge of this month.
Yeah.
But yeah, at least one of the one of the movies that we're gonna watch for sure. Yeah, I understand why.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But so for the story of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, it is it's kind. I guess it would be a political drama. I guess it'd be the best way to categorize this movie.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So it's starring Jimmy Stewart, and it starts off where there's a senator who, we're not really given the reason as to why, but he passes away, and
You just might have been
so
old.
they maybe, but they're scrambling to find a replacement. And we're never really given political parties as to like who's in which,
Right.
but so they're scrambling to find a seat to replace this dead senator, and they're trying to manipulate the citizens, like, oh, well, we need to have like this type of person or this person. We want them to kind of follow the party line, which sounds very familiar to today's politics because it's pretty much exactly what happens today. And this governor who's kind of along the same party, his kids are a huge fan of this guy who's a leader of this this young boys group called the Boy Rangers. So I'm assuming it's like kind of a version of the Boy Scouts, is kind of like what they were going for.
Right.
Kind of an outdoorsman, loves America, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. And they end up going with this guy who his name is Mr. Smith. What's his first name? I forget his first name in the movie. Jefferson Smith. And he is kind of this like gee golly shucks kind of character where he just
He's
doesn't.
very naive, very idealistic.
Yeah, and very quickly he gets a dose of reality of what he's up against, and they blast him in the media. They're asking him all these questions, and he's giving honest answers and just being himself.
Right, but they're manipulating everything. Like some of the pictures that they use, they superimpose like these headlines. One where he was doing like some sort of bird call, but he's like he's plugging his nose, and then the headline is like Jefferson's first sniff of Washington is like, and it's like it stinks or.
Right, and
just like these very underhanded, very deceitful sort of tactics.
And he goes about and I actually thought this was just like him and what he was thinking, but he actually goes on a rampage and he punches all of these senators or all these reporters in the face. It was great.
Or like it seems like even people just like carrying the newspapers.
Yeah. He started punching these reporters in the face, and he ends up chasing them into like this bar full of reporters. So there was that one scene. I thought that was hilarious because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of politicians that would love to punch some reporters in the face.
Right, but I think it was great in terms of as a character, because here's this young man from small town America, where a man is only as good as his word, and he literally comes to the den of vipers, to Washington, and he gets a taste of the venom, and it's like how dare you print these lies about me, so because he's more accustomed to small town living where everyone's held accountable for their actions or their words. He goes and deals squarely with these reporters, and which is to thoroughly punch them in the face.
Yeah, and so unlike Jefferson Smith, everyone's kind of in on they know the corruption it's all like it's kind of everyone's kind
of
very
mundane. The corruption is very mundane. It's par for the course. It's like, of course, there's corruption. Of course, people are going to make these these backroom deals, and and kind of like and greasing the wheels, so to speak. So it's all that kind of thing is very mundane for Washington.
It's like they know it's the game you have to play, and everyone kind of knows it, and so Jeff Smith, he's like, no, I don't want to do that, and but he is encouraged to by his the other senator that's of his state, to
the mentor figure.
The mentor figure who is like friends with his dad, who was essentially killed under mysterious circumstances, which is kind of interesting. That was never addressed in the film, but seemed rather
seems suspicious.
Exactly. And it was right after that where his dad's friend ended up becoming a senator, or he ended up kind of changing how he did things and ended up becoming a senator. So very interesting indeed. So he is telling the one thing that Jefferson Smith wants to do is one thing I'm really passionate about is I would love to create this boys camp utilizing where they we secure a certain land that
from the government, and we get a loan, and then the kids to learn some sort of civic duty, or just general finance, we'll take a loan out from the government, but then we'll have the kids pay back that loan.
Yeah, through like just random donations that they do to get into the camp,
Mm-hmm.
and it turns out that that land is part of a shady deal that's going on to secure this area around the dam. So it's kind of like a land grab for people to make money, utilizing the power that they have in government, which is very at, at at best corrupt, at worst illegal,
Right.
to do that. Um, and because of that, they are trying to like once that bill is kind of put into motion by Jefferson Smith, that's where all kind of hell breaks loose, and that's where
Right.
the real drama comes in, is because they work on because Smith won't play ball with kind of the party line. They blast him and they go against him, and that's where like the drama of the story comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really where, yeah, again, like Robert said, that's when like the real story begins, and it's Jefferson Smith fighting for his reputation, and it ultimately culminates in his filibustering of the Senate. And for those of you who didn't pay attention in their government class in school, or they just weren't taught this, filibustering is um, filibustering is what is it? What's the word I'm looking for? A tactic to be used to hold off on a vote in the Senate or in Congress.
Right.
And the rules are you have to be standing, and you have to be continuously speaking. And as soon as you sit down, you're basically yielding back the floor. So once you are up, you have to uh, you
Keep
just have
standing and
yeah
keep
you have to
going.
keep standing, keep talking, but you can yield. You can either yield the floor, or you can yield for questions. Um, but if you if you stop speaking, or if you sit down, then you've given up your right, and the vote can then go forward. And
Right.
yeah, there actually been a few instances in U.S. history where filibustering has happened, and one the only one that sticks out to me was one that I actually learned from my government class in high school. Was a senator or a congressman, I forget which, but they had like the Betty Crocker cookbook, and they read the entire cookbook cover to cover. So they're giving recipes for for brownies, and omelets and all sorts out of this Betty Crocker cookbook.
Oh, wait, I had to look that, because I feel like I remember hearing about that, but I don't remember the circumstances behind it. I might have to go back and
Right? Yeah. I
look
mean,
this.
it's just funny because I thought that was so hilarious that you literally can just have to keep speaking, and it doesn't matter what you say. Like there was I mean, fictitious example, but the King of the Hill episode where
Right,
Hank,
the toilet
yeah,
episode.
yeah, the toilet episode where
I was
the
gonna bring that
government
up, by the way.
forced the residents to switch to low flow toilets, but they were crappy, and you have to flush the toilet like 8 times, which defeats the purpose of low flow toilets. But it's also like this shady kind of corrupt government thing where one of the council members kind of benefited.
Owns the toilet company.
Yeah, worked for like the toilet company and benefited. And so what Hank does, he starts filibustering, and
So everyone has to take a shit.
yeah, like the thing is like you like everyone else could take like small breaks here and there, but Hank had to keep talking, and yeah, the gag was like they would eventually have to go to the bathroom and use these crappy low flow toilets and see like that they were no good, and that they would then vote to have them removed, and have like the high flow toilets be reinstated, or not illegal.
So yeah, I actually was gonna mention, because it was like after watching this movie, it's like, oh, I see that whole episode of King of the Hill was a parody off of Mr. Smith
Exactly.
Washington.
Yeah.
And obviously, you had the Simpsons episode where they were kind of making fun of like doing the Mel Gibson remake of
Yeah.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Right. Yes, but during back to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. About during his filibuster, you know um, Senator Payne, the other senator from his state and his mentor, he towards the end he's filled with so much remorse and guilt over what he's had to put this young man through, that he goes and he actually tries to kill himself. Because he's so rattled, he's so riddled with guilt over what he's what the slander and the libel that he's done to this young man, his former partner's son. Um, he
Right,
just
and I
tried to
think
kill himself, and then he ultimately confesses and says like, oh, because like they're trying to vote Jefferson Smith out of the Senate. And that's what the filibustering is for, to hold
right.
off on that vote. But the guilt and that Senator Payne was feeling was so great that he just finally broke down. It's like no, Jeff is a good guy. I'm the weasel. I should be the one voted out, not him. And like kind of like this very dramatic scene. And then
And I think that partly comes about because Smith confronts Senator Payne and says like because yeah, I think it was at the point of like hour like 20 or something like that when of this filibuster, and it's like talking, he's referencing to Senator Payne. It's like there was one time where I was told it's like that Senator Payne like used to fight for these lost causes, and it's like sometimes those were the only fights worth like going
right, it
for.
was a
Was
callback to the
causes.
Yeah, it was a callback to the conversation that they're having on the train on the way to Washington, and they were talking about the good old days and how he used to be friends with his dad, and they used to be partners, and how like they would that they both fought for the they both fought for the lost causes, and so he was kind of reminding him of where he started out as. And so, I think that coupled with like the anguish that he was putting, Jefferson in was just too much for Senator Payne, and he runs back after trying to kill himself with I think one of the guards pistols. He comes running back onto the Senate floor and is just like, no, I'm the one that doesn't deserve to be here,
Yeah,
and kind of and this kind of like redemptive moment.
right. I also want to talk. Let's talk about the female. I guess it would be the female lead is Saunders and her
Right.
character, and like
Yeah, Jean
how
Arthur.
she's obviously been kind of through the gauntlet of all these politicians, and she
Right.
knows the
She's
game
yeah, she's been
pretty
in the
well.
political machine at least since like maybe 16, or like at least
Right, and
by her words.
right, and it's like she's kind of like she's kind of seen it all, seen and done it all.
Hmm.
And in a
Yeah,
lot of ways, she's
like she herself was kind of like jaded by the whole thing, and she even like rolled her eyes at Jefferson Smith. When he came to town, he was like so full of like wonderment and like seeing all the monuments and Americana and things like that, that she was just like, okay, kid, just like try to just try to keep it in your pants.
right, and in a lot of ways, yeah, she's a quote unquote secretary, but
Mhm.
she's obviously a lot more than that,
Right.
because
Yeah.
she definitely is an influencer. I loathe to use that term, but yeah, she's
But
someone that like
I think in this context it's fitting, because like
right,
she had like that one reporter guy that was like her sidekick, but like was like totally in love with her, and she was the one that like knew how to get things done, and like was the one that schooled Jefferson about the process of how of writing a bill, and the process it takes for it to like go from you know the proposal to like committees, and then back to the House, and then back, and
right.
then like she was like
So
actually trying to dissuade him from this, but he was hearing this. It's like
all right, let's do
yeah,
it.
all right, yeah, let's do it.
Okay, should I get? Could I have time to get a pencil? So, oh yeah, you get a pencil.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
So
I
yeah.
I actually liked her character a lot because
Yeah, me
if
too. I liked her
anybody,
a lot too.
she, I think of any character in the movie, she grows the most because she goes from this jaded, like she was ready to get out of politics. Like she was like working I need to get the hell out of this town. I need to get married. I just need to get away.
Mm.
And she was like, and Smith was the guy that I think changed her mindset and saying like, wow,
Right. He was the one that
there's someone.
broke. He was the one that
He's not
broke her
just a
cynicism.
right, because it's like it wasn't just about like he wasn't just saying these things. He actually believed them and was willing to fight for it. And I think like in she talked about like I feel like this weird gravitation towards him, and she thought maybe it was like these motherly like kind of like I feel like I'm kind of taking care of this kid,
Yeah.
but then it developed into real feelings, which
Right. Because like yeah, especially
was
when he
kind
was
of
like
a
this.
very like a weird side note because they never really developed like I mean obviously there was a connection between them, but she I think what um they never there was no after story essentially like it
Right.
kind of didn't like uh we're left hanging on a lot of storylines in this
Right.
movie, by the way.
Uh-huh. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, he was. Jefferson Smith was just a genuine person, and but he said what he meant, and he meant what he said, and he believed everything. He believed in the greatness of America and like the process and all of that. All of that stuff. Um, and it was his energy, his naivete that kind of revitalized, that revitalized her. And and like the way that he talked wasn't like anyone that she'd ever known, because being, she even said like she grew up in the city, like in Baltimore, and then she worked in Washington for so long, and like the politicians, like they say one thing but they mean another, or they mean one thing but they say another.
Right.
But here comes Jefferson Smith, and he speaks. He means what he says, and he says what he means. And like and even like the way he describes things is so genuine and authentic, that it just smashes her cynicism, and it's like and it reinvigorates her to help him prepare for the filibuster.
Yeah. And so I love the relationship between those two. And um, let's talk a little. So something I noted, and I think we talked a little bit about before we started filming, recording this, is the how. Yes, this movie is 80 years old, but how ridiculously similar to what we're dealing with in today's media and
Right. Yeah.
politics.
Yeah. Like
This movie felt
80 years
very
old,
relevant.
but it couldn't be more relevant to today.
And one thing was like obviously in how the media manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously like when they're trying to uh you know kind of bury Jefferson Smith with the media and like, oh no, so nothing that he's saying, what he's actually saying is getting out. It's only like kind of bits and pieces and very edited content to make him look bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yet you have this like kind of small, young, like kind of small, like the Boy Rangers newspaper is the only one that's actually telling the truth of the story. And then they're being like beaten up and railroaded
Right, and yeah,
by
it's you can see the progression, because at first, it's just like they're going, they kind of spot the kids and they just grab the bundles from the kids, and then next it's I think there was like some sort of like town meeting or something, and like there's like these what you would call them maybe pundits, but they're like kind of railing against Jefferson Smith, and there's like this one lone kid in the crowd. It's like, yo, no, like, Jeff's telling the truth, and like immediately, like, two guys come in, like, kind of muzzle him and like carry him out. And then like slowly more and more escalation. And it's like, there's like this truck, and like there's like this kid with pulling the wagon full of like the bundles of the newsletters, and then like the truck just runs over the wagon. And then
but no,
and then
the worst
and then
part-
it finally escalates into a straight up murder when there's like this group of like older kids, like teens, and they're like driving in a car with these signs that saying like believe in Jeff, or Jeff's not Jeff is telling the truth. And then all of a sudden, like, one of Taylor, who's I think was based off of William Randolph Hearst, if I'm not mistaken.
that might be I had to look that up, but yeah, I heard that might be true.
Yeah, but some of his men are driving like this big truck, and they just purposely run into this car full of kids,
And they run him into like a brick wall.
Yeah.
And it's like, they killed those kids.
Yeah, they killed those kids. And I mean, I was
watching this with my girlfriend at the time. We both were like, what the hell just happened? They killed those kids.
Yeah. It's absolutely, it's actually absolutely mind-boggling, but it's also, it's also analogous to what's happening now with like tech censorship and like the media, the legacy media, trying to have a stranglehold on the news and what information gets out there, and so like watching that scene, it was very analogous, because first, like, they just try to take the bundles away, which is kind of like what is it? Like kind of like YouTube, and how like they came up with like the system of flagging. It's like, someone says something objectionable, let us know. We'll take care of it. It's like initially it's like these small things, like just take away the bundles away from the kids, or and then it's like demonetizations, or copyright claims. When when you have like them like running over like wagons full of like the bundles, or and then you have like putting videos into like limited state, when it's like literally like those two men who are censoring that small boy, and then you have like the total like erasure of people, a la Alex Jones or Gavin McInnes or Laura Loomer or what have you.
Yeah, they're
with the murder of those children.
Yeah. It was just it was crazy. It's like this movie is 80 years old, but how similar and relevant it is to today that was all I could think about when I was watching this film. And it's like, no, I love the movie, I love the characters, I love the drama, and it just, man, but it's so relevant to today.
Absolutely, 100%.
And it's like, a couple things that I felt were, if I had to nitpick the film a little bit, I felt like it built up to this climax, and then it just ended, like, because there was no like, I mean, maybe it probably would have been a little out of place, I guess, like, because obviously there was the semi love story between Jefferson Smith and Saunders, that kind of developed throughout the film, and then there was no like resolution as to what happened to guys like Senator Payne and like the political machine behind him.
Right, James Taylor.
The James Taylor machine. So there was really, like, it was just kind of the filibuster ended, and so the movie ended. And so I was saying, it's like the movie ended a little abruptly.
Right. Yeah, because it was like, yes, so Jefferson probably wasn't going to be voted out of the Senate, but you didn't see the aftermath. Kind of like in later political driven dramas, you kind of have like the whirling newspaper where it says like, oh, Senator Payne, voted at the Senate. James Taylor under, and then another one coming up is like James Taylor investigated for corruption and and grifting, as they would call it.
Right. So there's really like no.
So yeah, so we're kind of like left hanging and left to our own imaginations to kind of
Which
maybe
is
put
fine.
like a conclusion, not an ending,
Yeah.
but a conclusion to like some of
Right.
like the dangling storylines.
Right. Which is fine. I don't mind like having kind of like left to my imagination type of endings, but for everything that happened, I've never seen a movie end at the climax. Usually there's a little bit of like kind of cool down at the end, and then the
Right.
movie
Yeah.
ends. I've never
Yeah, because
seen a
it's so
movie end
intense.
like
Yeah, because
this.
it's so intense. You kind of need that, like, kind of parachute back down to the ground. But
Yeah,
but we didn't
we
get
are
that. We
not.
just we just jumped out. We jumped out, and then it's like and then it just cuts out.
Yeah, I've never seen a movie in my life ever end quite like that. So that, I mean, I don't know if I would say that that's a negative or a positive. Just I've never seen it before.
Hmm.
Was there anything that like maybe you didn't care for about the film, or is there something like you felt like you wish you would have had a little bit more of a resolution towards?
Uh, hmm. I don't think so. I think this might be a time where, like, again, we're kind of like lined up. Yeah, where my only gripe, not my only, but my major gripe is the abruptness of the ending.
The the other thing that we didn't touch on too, the car with the older boy rangers, those
Mhm.
are Senator Payne's kids, by the way.
Are they? I didn't even notice.
Yeah, yeah. One like at least two of them were Senator Payne's
Oh, no, no,
kids.
no. Wait. No, those are the governor's kids.
Oh, the
Yeah, because
governor's.
Senator Payne had a daughter, but then
That's
he
right.
didn't
Yeah,
mention.
no,
Yeah.
that's what I meant. It was the governor's kids that were in that car.
Oh my. Yeah. Yeah, because if it, like, I mean, they like the governor's kids weren't old enough to drive, but they were at least in the car.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice that. So
that's
yeah, there should have been. Yeah, there's like there should be been an event. Like there should have been like at the end there should have been like another spinning wheels talking about how was it Taylor being investigated for the death of the governor's children?
yeah. It's like that. That was that was the wildest moment. Like in that to me in that film, it's like what the they killed those kids, and they were the governor's kids who like fought to like who like you know at that scene at dinner like where they're like talk.
Yeah,
You
they're
know,
talking up Jefferson Smith and say, "Oh yeah, you'd be a
yeah,
fool not to appoint Jefferson Smith." And for those of you younger people who look confused, it's like, why would a governor appoint a senator? That's how it used to work back in the days. Before I forget which amendment.
yeah.
It's one of the later amendments. But before, senators were appointed by the state because they were supposed to represent the interests of the state.
Right,
Because
yeah,
they
they were
weren't
not
supposed
appointed
to.
like they are.
Yeah, they weren't supposed to represent the people of the state. They were supposed to represent the interests of the state itself, because that's what the Congress is for. The Congress is a direct representation of the people within the state.
I'm trying to remember like when did that. I forgot when that amendment went into effect where we actually voted for senators. Um, I don't think it was much longer after that, by the way.
Yeah, it was like probably either the tail end or kind of like the middle of maybe like even during World War II.
I think because there was definitely some changes after FDR's death. I think that may have been one of them where they
Right.
decided to. Yeah, so that would be the one thing that's a little bit different politically than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's this is a great movie. I see why it's one of the all-time greats.
Mm-hmm.
What did we say? It was number 6 on the list.
I believe. No, 6 was something else. Hold on.
What is this on the AFI list? Top 100.
Right. Hold on. Oops. AFI Top 100. Oh, it's 26.
26. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but still
26.
pretty high up there.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any thoughts before we give our rating, Andy, that you'd like to mention in the film? Mention about the film?
No. Yeah. Again, this is one of those movies that I only know kind of like the cultural relevance. But actually,
Was this your first time watching it?
yeah.
Yeah, same here. I've never seen. I actually have never. I've seen all the tropes and everything, but like
Yeah, the
I've
tropes and parodies, and I kind of understand this cultural significance of the movie, but I never watched the movie outright. Uh,
So
so,
yeah, this is a great treat actually for me.
mhm. Yeah, it was great. It was great. I really enjoyed it, and especially like just how applicable, just how relevant it is. Even after all this time, it's still
Yeah,
relevant. It's quite amazing and spectacular to think about. Although it kind of makes sense because you know socialism and all the ills of the world happened at the beginning of the last century. So I guess this if time is or history is cyclical, then it only makes sense because it's the beginning of this new century. So
yeah.
it's only logical that socialism and communism rear their ugly heads again at the beginning of this new century.
Yeah, definitely. It was. I was blown away by how relevant the movie is even today.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be your rating on this movie, Andy?
My rating for this is 4.5. 4.5 stars.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that too because I do. As much as I like Gone with the Wind, I
Mm-hmm.
think this movie was a little bit better. So I don't think I can't rate them the same way.
Right.
Um,
And they're different experiences as well.
Completely different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I think just, and I don't think it's just because of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously this is a this is a much shorter movie than Gone with the Wind.
True. What is it?
I mean, so that was definitely
It's
a
like
little
a
bit of a
third. It's like
breather.
a third of the length of Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Amazing to think about, but yeah, this movie was 1/3 the length of Gone with the Wind.
I
Jeez.
would have given it 5 if not for I felt a little bit unsettled with how quickly the movie ended.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm not giving it a 5.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, everything else like it does all the awards that it was nominated for and whatever it did win, it definitely deserved it.
Mm-hmm.